I know over the last week I've spent a lot of time talking about the failures of Donald Trump and the American system to keep its word, but the same failures exist in the UK as well. Perhaps not to the same extent, but it is a moral failure and a policy disgrace that the United Kingdom has treated Ukrainian refugees with a level of bureaucratic indifference that borders on the callous, and that those who are given leave to remain are expected to be grateful. The deliberate decision to keep Ukrainian visa status in limbo, to offer only temporary lifelines and then snatch them away again, is an embarrassment. Worse still, it's entirely predictable given our track record of demanding gratitude for merely adhering to treaties signed in better times. This is a feature which, ironically, is almost a parallel to what's happening in the United States. At the heart of this system, at the heart of this failure, is a system that never fully accepted Ukrainians as refugees in the full legal sense. Instead, we treated them as temporary guests, convenient for a government that wanted to appear generous while keeping one eye on the political optics of immigration. Ukrainians who arrived under the Homes for Ukraine scheme were given 3-year visas. Now, as those visas have approached expiry, an 18-month extension has been offered, but without a pathway to permanent settlement. Their time in the UK doesn't count towards the 5 years required for indefinite leave to remain. It's a policy that prioritises expediency over humanity, leaving thousands in limbo, uncertain whether they will be told to pack their bags when the clock runs out. We need to be clear. The UK didn't handle Ukrainian refuge status properly in the first place. It was never given a long-term solution. The shifting visa rules have been chaotic at best, cruel at worst. The case of Ivan Vitsin and Olesia Aladko is a prime example, which was in the news the other day. They came to the UK under seasonal worker visas, found a home, planned to reunite with their children under the sponsorship scheme, and then without warning, the government changed the eligibility criteria, preventing their children from coming, preventing them from acting as sponsors. Desperate, they attempted to navigate a bureaucratic maze filled with scammers, delays, and an unfeeling Home Office. And eventually the government has reversed course, too little, too late, and the psychological toll of separation cannot be undone by a late-night policy U-turn. Let's also acknowledge that this incompetence was entirely foreseeable. Britain failed to anticipate Trump's erratic manoeuvres, despite the fact that his position on Ukraine has always been clear. He is, in the words of Sir General Richard Sheriff, Putin's most useful idiot. And the recent suspension of US military aid that has left Ukraine so vulnerable was entirely predictable. Yet the UK's approach to its Ukrainian residents remains, even in the face of this nonsense, lukewarm at best. While Keir Starmer has made gestures towards a coalition of the willing, this doesn't extend to giving Ukrainians here the security they deserve. Even before the latest visa extension debacle, Ukrainian refugees in the UK were facing immense struggles. Many highly qualified individuals found themselves trapped in low-wage work, their skills unrecognised, their futures uncertain, and the British Red Cross has highlighted the alarming rate of homelessness among Ukrainians, with thousands forced into precarious housing, including ill-suited accommodation like cruise ships in Glasgow and Edinburgh. In one case, a Ukrainian woman was left homeless at midnight and slept on a beach in the UK. Others desperate for housing were targeted by predatory landlords running setups designed for exploitation. And yet the political calculus of refugee policy is shifting, with the Labour government facing pressure from the anti-immigration right, including the growing threat to the Reform Party. Some may well choose to reduce migration numbers at any cost. And the easiest way to do this, let the Ukrainian visas expire and refuse further extensions. And even in the face of an ongoing war, Britain could argue that the conflict is stabilising, forcing thousands to return to a country they barely recognise after years away. What then? Many are from eastern Ukraine, areas that will soon be under Russian control if Trump has his way in a negotiated settlement. Do we send them back to live under occupation, to live under Moscow, to rebuild homes that no longer exist? If Ukrainians are forced to leave, Britain will have failed them twice. Firstly, by treating them as temporary guests rather than genuine refugees. Second, by abandoning them when it became politically expedient to do so. The UK cannot pat itself on the back for generosity while simultaneously dismantling the very support systems that allow these families to rebuild their lives. As we pass the third anniversary of the Russian invasion, Britain must decide what kind of country it wants to be. How does it want history to recognise it? A nation that truly stands with Ukraine, that stands with the right, or one that simply offers sanctuary on sufferance, only to pull the rug out from under the feet of those who trusted us most? In short, we have a choice. We can behave like Britain, or we can behave like the United States. We can behave with honour, or we can behave with dishonour. We can demand gratitude, or we can demand that we act properly.